Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. This month, we have something special that we're doing that we have not done before. And it is a special three-part series with my guest this month, Sean Dustin, who is the host of Nowhere to Go But Up. I decided to create a three-part series because during our interview together, his story was so moving and touching. I did not feel that I could edit it down to a 1 hour session. So I want everyone to know that this will just have natural breaks and the story will continue for 3 consecutive weeks. Thank you and enjoy. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. As always, thank you for being here, and I hope our conversation today gives you something to think about and a dose of hope and inspiration. We've got a really cool guest with us today that I am super excited about this conversation. I'm going to just read his bio to you because I just love the way that he wrote it. I have with me today Sean Dustin, who says that he is an addict. On my own path of recovery, I was addicted to meth for 18 years. 2010, quit that, picked up painkillers for 7 years after that, then spent 3 years in prison as a result from my addiction. Now I'm a father, a union tradesman, a cultivator, and a podcaster of Nowhere to Go But Up. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. So welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me. And thank you, Simona, for hooking us up and putting us together.
Yes, thank you, Simona, our amazing podcast producer. So I'm going to jump right in. You've had quite a journey to bring you where you are today, and I want to hear all about it. So why don't you talk to us about your path? Because it seems like it's been a bit of a road for you. So
Yeah,
please.
yeah. You could say that. That's an understatement. So everybody, my name's Sean Dustin. I'm 48 and I've been an addict for a long time, And let's preface this, anything that I say, everything that I've been through, everything that I've gone through, situations I've been in are all a direct result of my own bad decisions and behaviors that have come out of, addiction, because that's a whole thing, addiction and how I feel about it is, and we'll get to that because I have my own perspectives on it and what it really is. I grew up in a broken home, parents divorced early on, 7 years old, I believe, 5 or 7. And, it was a violent sort of deal, I guess. I was too young to remember most of it, but my brother and sister used to tell me that they would, as soon as the fighting would start, they'd whisk me away into a closet somewhere hidden and sing to me. And so I adopted these stories in my own mind as if they were my own, right? That's because that's what we do. We hear about how horrible something was when we were a kid, and we may not even have been there, but as our minds make the picture and try to paint that picture of the story that you're hearing, I would, take that on as if I was there. So I would tell that story, and like my dad would be like, "You're what? You weren't even there. How do you know?" And anyways,
But I think that
that's
that's the power of siblings, right? Because it sounds like you were the baby and you had an
mhm.
older brother and sister and they were protecting you. But I think that that's true. Sometimes we look at photographs and we don't necessarily have a memory, but we start believing that we have that memory, right? Because our siblings tell us what happened. We see pictures of it, even though we really don't have a memory of it. But now we do. Now we think we actually have a memory of it. I
Yeah,
mean, so when you said a violent household, are you talking about between your mom and your dad, they would fight?
yeah,
Was it,
yeah,
was it, would it get physical?
yeah. I mean, that's what I was told.
But you have no memory.
I never witnessed any of it, and so that they divorced, and it was a tumultuous divorce, and I was in the middle of it and was being pulled back and forth, and I'd go to my dad's, and that whole side of the family would be talking horrible about my mom. I'd come home and just hate my mom, and you know what I mean, that whole thing would ensue. And so I was just an angry kid, man. I was angry for a lot of reasons. And, that projected out everywhere. I took it out on kids. I was a bully. I was aggressive, learned, this is a part that I really don't talk about, but I mean, it really formed some of the, like, because I think back about it and I think about some of the behaviors and how sex played a part of it. I was exposed to porn at a really young age, and seeing, you're not supposed to see that stuff as a kid, right? You're not supposed to see those images because those images don't go away, and those images make something else happen somewhere else, just instinctively, out of our own nature as a biological being, right? And so, yeah, that was a whole like direction that went as a kid, and experimental stuff the kids do. That went a direction, and
Who
so
was
there was
exposing you? Who was exposing you to this? Was it older children? Was it older kids? Was it?
no, we were in a, like, there was across the street there was a, like, a fort, right? From a, I don't know if it was a house from a family from before that lived there, or the current family that lived there, but I don't think they had any kids because they would just let us go back there and play, right? And play in it. And we found a secret compartment, and in that compartment were all of these magazine things. So nobody exposed it. We just ran into it. And I would go back and frequently look at it. Probably took a couple of them with me, and that, okay, well, we mimic what we see, right? And as kids, I mean, I have my own child. I see that in a 5-year-old, right? I'll do something, I'll say something, and then your parrot, right behind you a minute later, and it's like, oh, you're not supposed to say that stuff, and I'm not supposed to say it in front of you. Dang it! So, yeah. And anyways, so I mean, there was always that. So, like, that's sort of an addiction too, because it's a feel good dopamine hit that fixes something for you. You know what I mean? And so it's something else that I chased for, along with drugs, when I figured out what drugs were. But I mean, I was doing all of that stuff prior to the drugs. So first, and my story is so long.
No, please. Because what I'm thinking, I mean, the premise of all of this, right, and what you and I talked about is how, when we think about grief and loss, grief is embedded in so many things in our lifetime. Whenever there is an ending to anything, there's grief. And what you and I talked about, and of course we know this about drugs, when we go to a drug, whatever that drug of choice is, it is doing something. It is feeding some insatiable, I like to call it a hole. There's something inside of us that it's an itch that can't be scratched, right? Or an emotion that we want to tamp down, or whatever it is. We have lots of different drugs in whether it's self-injurious behavior, an addiction to an actual substance, like you said before, it can be sex, it can be a lover, it can be running and exercise, it can be food, it can be lots of different things. And so when you got into your drug addiction, what do you think? I mean, it sounds like, you had this tumultuous childhood. Some of it you do not remember, but we know growing up in violence, it's traumatic. It is a trauma. And so when you first discovered drugs, I mean, 2010, you said, right, was when you first, was that your first?
That's when I quit. That's when I quit.
Oh, that's when you quit using. When
Yeah.
did you start using?
When I was 16.
Wow. Okay.
But that was just meth. So I had tried
18
marijuana
years, you said. Okay.
when I had tried marijuana for the first time, and I had tried alcohol too. So the first time I tried alcohol, I got like 4 beers, spins, drunk, threw up. Didn't like the way that felt. I was around the time when Walkmans were still a thing, right? And they just came out. My mom had taken mine away and hid it from me, but I was a latchkey kid. And the reason why I was a latchkey kid is the place where she had me in a daycare, because she had to go to work in the city now to take a job to make enough money to afford to buy my dad out of the house, to keep us in the house. all that stuff that goes along with divorce, right? And so now I had to go to a daycare, which the elementary school behind it is the school that I went to and enrolled in. So it was a perfect situation for her. It was set up, nicely. Although the thing that she didn't count on is that my angry little ass was doing all kinds of, inappropriate things with kids, but also, doing things that, hurt kids too. And so when I got expelled from that place because I threw a what I thought was a dirt clod, you know what I mean? But inside it was an actual rock that had formed, that the dirt had formed around. And so when I threw it, it didn't break apart. It kept going and it hit a girl in the face. And so I ended up getting kicked out of there and became a latchkey kid, which had to take myself to and from school. And so when she would take things away from me, I'd be like, all right, well, I'm just going to go rummage through your shit and find it, because you're not here to keep me from doing anything, And so that's really where I started becoming so independent, right? And just doing whatever I wanted. And like, dude, no one's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want. And even if you do, all right, I can't go outside. Well, I'm just going to put the phone off the hook. And I've been on the phone all day, Mom. I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? And so I would rummage through her shit. And in doing that, I stumbled on a bong that had some pot and whatever, right? I'd never done it before. I'd never seen this before, but somehow I knew what to do with it. And I think it's because I saw the black around the bowl. And so I just, that's like burnt. So you're supposed to light it. Or I don't know how I knew how to do what I did to use it, but I did.
And how old were you at this point?
Oh man, I'm gonna say like 9, 10. No. Third year, no, third grade. Third grade is what? How old is that? Because that's when I got put in. That's when I started having to take myself.
11. No, not that old, right? 10 maybe.
I was in the third grade, bringing myself home from school every day, and at home taking care of myself while my mom was at work. So whatever age that is, that's when that's when I started touching all that type of stuff. And so when I first did it, I knew what to do with it. I figured it out. I didn't put any water in it though. I know that because it was really scratchy and it choked me. But
wow.
We lived on this steep hill and I would never get on my skateboard and ride it all the way down. Right. I was always afraid. After I smoked a couple hits of this thing, all my fear was gone. And I hopped on my skateboard and I went all the way down the hill and I didn't fall and I didn't jump off. And I was like, oh my God, what is this stuff? You know what I mean? So I immediately knew that there's this thing now over here that like made me feel invincible and like I wasn't afraid.
And you were baby, right?
Yeah, I was young, like third grade.
Yeah, 9.
Third or fourth grade, something like that.
Anyways, you were very, very young and you discovered pot.
Yeah.
And where is your father? Is he just gone? Is he involved in your life at all at this point?
I mean, I see him every other weekend.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And he does that and, he pays his child support. He does, the things that he's supposed to do. But I mean, I don't know. He tried, he tried up to a point. He tried up to a point to where it was like, I even went and lived with him at one point and, that didn't work out, and I was just a badass kid, man. I got kicked out of a whole bunch of different schools, from that beginning of that to that, drugs entered, like, so the hardcore drugs entered my life probably around, like I said, 16. So I'm going to say it was my freshman summer. Yeah, it was somewhere around there. And none of my friends would let me try it. But they were all doing it, and I knew they were doing something because they would all disappear. Like when we were hanging out on a Friday night, they'd disappear into a room and lock the door, and I was like the youngest one, and no one let me in. And finally, I found out what they were doing, and I knew that my dad, when my mom and dad divorced, he ended up marrying the woman down the street around the corner, and she had a sister. And her sister was 15 years older than me. So I'm 16. She's in her 30s. She's a stoner tweaker chick. And I knew that I could get what I was looking for there. And I went and I asked, and she gave it to me.
And this is crystal meth you're talking about.
Well, it was crank back then, so it was
Crank.
like before it became, the crystal meth thing. It was like the dirty biker dope. And so she's 30, 30 some odd years old. She gives it to me for the first time, and I think I like fell in love at that point, right? Because I chased it constantly from that point on. Got in a lot of trouble, ran away from home a bunch of times, end up getting in some more trouble getting trouble with the law for the first time. That happened in my freshman year. So I'm on probation for some shit that I did when I was a freshman. And so my mom, once I start using, I'm not coming home. You know what I mean? I'm obviously breaking probation. So when we go to court, I think she calls my PO and says that she can't control me. And so she ends up giving me up to a court as a ward of the state, even though I'm still living with her, but it gives them the power to remove me at any time for any reason. And so I, keep getting in trouble, I've gone to juvenile hall. I was out on I did a 151 days at Byron Boys Ranch. I got a weekend visit for Thanksgiving, split, went and hung out with some chick and got an escape charge, added more time to my already whatever, you know what I mean? So it was like every time I would just step into a bigger pile of shit.
And let me ask you something just to kind of bring it back to, this kid, you're a kid, you're just a kid, right? And now you've got a narrative. You're a bad kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Putting bad in quotes. You're a bad kid, you're into drugs, you're in and out of trouble, and that becomes who you are. What's going on for you? I mean, you're numbing out with drugs. Are you waking up feeling full of shame? Like, where is you in this pile of shit, as you call it? Where is that frightened kid? Where is that voice, that inner voice? Do you hear it? Has it disappeared? Like, where, do you know what I'm asking?
I think so.
Like in this chaos, in this turmoil that's happening, have you just resigned to yourself that, hey, I'm a badass kid and I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing? Or is there a small voice anywhere inside of you that is still there saying, I don't want this? Like, I'm
I'm
trying to,
angry. I'm
okay, you're
angry.
pissed. Okay, that's what I'm trying.
I'm angry. It doesn't matter. And I've learned how to get around doing everything. All right. From school to, manipulate. I learned. So every time when I say this, it sounds so conceited, but I don't mean it that way. When, as a younger kid, man, I was a good looking guy. All right. All right. An attractive younger gentleman. Right. And I used that to my advantage. And being a new kid at school and all these different places and moving around, it gave me the ability to see that, oh, it's not just this one place, it's everywhere I go I get this kind of attention, right? The kind of attention that makes you forget and lose, whatever it is, because it's dopamine hits. It's just like getting likes and on social media. That's why social media is so goddamn, you know what I mean? It's the same thing. And so I figured out how to do this. And in figuring out how to do this, I learned how to manipulate the opposite sex and use them for what I need them for, right? Whether it's the trading the girl, that's picking up the scantrons every day from school, and trading her weed so I can mark myself there instead of absent, you know what I mean? Because I'm just in the parking lot selling drugs, you know? So I always figured out a way to get out of doing what I was supposed to be doing. And in that, being a latchkey kid, I never had any discipline. I never had any structure, never had a role model. I just became everything I saw on TV, right? Because that was I would come home, I'd watch TV, I'd, go run around the neighborhood,
Did you flunk out of school? Like, what is going on with school? It doesn't sound like you're going to school or attending classes or doing any of those things.
So when I was in junior high, I had moved from so many different schools. So the junior high thing. So this junior high that I went in my area, I got expelled from there when I started as a seventh grader. I went to my dad's in Sacramento. I flunked out of that, ended up having to go to summer school, got kicked out of summer school, went to my uncle's in South San Francisco, San Bruno by the airport. Ended up getting kicked out of that school. My mom had to go beg and plead for me to get into the school that they kicked me out of because the other school wasn't in our district. They said yes, and I went in half the year, and I got suspended 57 times, sent to the office, or not 57 times, sent to the office 57 times, got suspended a whole bunch of times. And 2 weeks before the end of the school, and I have straight Fs, mind you. I don't go to school. I don't do shit. They said, you know what? Go home. Don't ever come back. We never want to see you here again. We're socially promoting you to the 9th grade. Goodbye. And so it was, all the moving and everything else, it was hard for it to catch up. You know what I mean? And I didn't care anyways. And so they're just like, get out. You know what I mean? You're not going to, you like I said, I was a bad kid and I was believing the narrative. And I always wanted, I was always up to something. You know what I mean? Whether it was trying to fuck or trying to screw this girl or hook up with this girl, even that young, right? And it wasn't like screwing. It was like, playing around because that felt good. And I'm always chasing what feels good because guess what I learned early is how to soothe myself through masturbation and all these other things that, you know what I mean? I'm not supposed to know yet.
No, I know it's making me very emotional because I did a lot of volunteer work for kids in the juvenile justice facility where, it's not where they belonged, right? I mean, you didn't end up there by yourself. It was a series of things as a child. So many things that happened where now you're just this kid that's trying to survive and actually just run away from you, right? Just run away. And so you get deep into the drugs, it sounds like, at a very early age. And it's an 18-year span.
Mm-hmm.
And have you taken to the streets at this point? Like what?
Not
18
yet,
years is a long time.
Yeah, not yet. Well,
And it didn't kill
was,
you, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to this story because it's not just, I did it straight. There were periods where I really tried to stop and I tried to do good and I just kept making my way back there. You know what I mean? I would always go back to the familiar. And I knew like I guess it's that old saying, hey, I'd rather stick with the evil I know than the evil I don't. Right.
And did you get into, were you going into rehab facilities? Like when was sort of that tipping point the first time that you tried to quit?
So after I got in trouble and started and the incorrigible and all these other things started piling up, right? Finally, I was faced with doing, either 6 months was what they told me in a group rehab because I said, hey, I'm doing drugs and I didn't really think I had a problem, but it was either 9 months with a bunch of guys or 6 months with some chicks too. And that's how I thought, you know what I mean? Everything was revolved around women and chasing that feel good. And then chasing the other feel good that kept me from feeling all the things that I didn't want to feel. Right. Like I've, whatever it was, I never felt like I fit in, to anything. The parents, all of that, the blaming myself for my parents not being together, whatever it is, whatever drug I was on just killed it all, and allowed me to focus on myself, you know what I mean? And all of my needs and the things that I'm trying to gobble up in an addict's path. Right. And so I take the 6 months and the first, I'd say 8 of it, I'm not following the program. I, run away with the chick, go and screw her, come back. They allowed me to come back in. I was manipulating the whole way in there. I would do things to set myself apart from the other students to make myself seem more, you know what I mean? So what I mean by that is I would manipulate the kitchen staff, and there was a woman who ran the kitchen, to get in there to help her, even though I had no business being in there. And I would I'd get in there and start making an omelet and stuff that's not on the menu and then walk out and eat it in front of everybody. And you know what I mean? So I would just do shit like that. I had the guys that were in the emancipation track that got to leave every day. We got an allowance of $5. I figured out how to get some money together. I'd send them to to buy me packs of cigarettes and sell them for $1 a piece to all the kids, right? It was always something. I'm into everything. I'm never satisfied with anything. I'm always chasing something. Even now, it's not gone. I can't figure out how to get rid of it, but then it was like figuring, that's this thing, right? It's almost like I mean, I don't even know how to, anyways, I don't know how to explain that.
You don't have to. I can feel it. I mean, I think it's, I think that most of us spend a good amount of time running from discomfort. And I think that, with these, in your situation, it's sort of that, it's a desperate chase. It's a desperate chase. And what I think, and as I said, just working with the kids that I worked with in the juvenile justice, the trauma, it goes back to traumatic events that happen to children at a very early age too, right? And it looks different for everybody, but I feel like for you, you had this perfect storm of trauma. You didn't have parents around to help guide you. You were in a violent household, and on top of that, you had the people that you were in your life were introducing you to these things that typically children your age would never be introduced to. So I feel like you had just, the cards were just stacked not in your favor in terms of what it came down to is you were trying to survive your own life. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. And just using whatever tools that or behaviors that became tools.
Exactly what was available to you. So now you are using crystal meth. You said you were in and out of. You went to this group home for boys.
Yeah, well, no, it was for female.
Boys
it was
and
group.
girls.
And that was the kicker that got me there because it was co-ed. And so I'm like, all right, well, that I'll do that. And what I didn't count on is that when you go to a residential therapeutic community like that, it's not based on time. All right, especially if you're placed there for the ward, as a ward of the court, or on the group home side of this, because there was a hospital side where it's just the traditional 30, 60, 90 days for kids, and then the group home side was for more like serious cases like myself. And so that 6 months ended up turning into 16 months. All right. And it was because I wasn't conforming to the program.
You weren't working the program. Right. It's all.
I wasn't getting real. I wasn't.
Right.
I was still running from me. And this is, and so the key here is that I am the problem. Right. And because of whatever caused it, created it, however it happened, the result is this. All right. And this constantly tried to run from figuring out what caused this. I never stayed in one place long. I've never sat in my own shit long enough to figure out what it's doing to me or why it's doing it to me. And it's still, to this point, I've got a lot of awareness. I've made a lot of amazing, like, tracking down, where it comes from, where it stemmed from, but I'm still in the process. So I get out of there. All right. So finally I get caught up on this saying, you have to surrender to win. And I heard that somewhere in there, whether it was a meeting that I went to or something else, but it resonated with me because I was so tired of fucking.
It's okay. Just take a breath. I can feel it. It's okay.
I was tired of fighting.
You're gonna make me cry. Just take your time.
I was tired of fighting and fucking fighting everything.
It's exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah, because I'm still fighting. But I did what I had to do to get out of there. All right. And so in doing that, I had to conform. I had to buy in. Right. And I did.
Where did you go when you got out of there? Where did you go? Because now how old are you at this point?
Well, I'm 17. All
17.
Right?
You're all okay.
And so something else really important happened there. In buying in and conforming, I excelled. And I would go to they would take me on these outreaches to high schools, and I would tell my story. And then I would get like letters back from the kids, and it was cool. But I started doing writing, and I really got in school and wanted to graduate and got my GED, and I was like, that's not good enough for me. I want to go, I want to do more.
It's okay. I'm literally hugging you virtually, and just take your time. And if it's too much, you let me know, okay?
I don't know if I can do this, man. I don't know if I can make it through this. All right.
What's coming up for you right now? It's powerful, whatever it is.
I think it's more because that was like the first time that I'd ever been seen in a good light.
That glimpse, that's what I was talking about earlier. You saw a glimpse of you, not the you, not the you that was, not the pain you, right? The beauty, the essence of who you really are. Did you get frightened when you saw a glimpse of the potential?
No, I embraced it
Okay.
and ended up doing like shit, won a scholarship for, an essay that I wrote. Got invited to go to some conference, for whatever, and ended up doing like there was like I got invited to speak in front of like 500 educators and like legislators, about my story. I became the poster child of like this place works, right? The only problem was I couldn't sustain it because it wasn't, there was no real foundation.
What do you mean?
I wasn't doing it because I believed it. I was doing it because I knew it would get me out of there. And so it wasn't built on,
The belief that you were worthy of it.
oh, no, it wasn't built on a true foundation. You know what I mean? And part of that true foundation is if I don't feel like I'm worthy of it, then I'm not risking anything if I lose it.
That's what I mean. Yes. And I get chills and I think that that's getting to the deeper truth of, we all call it the imposter syndrome, right? Like, here you are, you've got the narrative that you're the bad kid. You are the quintessential fuck up. You get suspended all the time, you're in a group home, but now you discover something. It's like finding a flower blooming under a pile of trash. You discover something beautiful about yourself and you write this piece, and now this light is shining on you, but not a light in a bad way, right? That you're used to. You're used to that. This is a light shining on this essence, this beauty, and it's blinding. That's what I feel. And now you're going to run from that. Does that sound at all true?
Yeah. And so the next part of this is where I go from there. So I end up going to the emancipation track, and I do well there. I get a job. I'm working for a professional theater company building sets for, a production. Like there's this theater called the Joaquin Miller Theater, and it's like a professional, like paid actors go to do, big productions up there. I go to live with my brother, so I was aware that my brother at the time was doing, movies, like not movies, but like auditioning to try to, get land roles. And he had told me that he was working on a role as a cross dresser, right? And so when I went to live there, I moved from there to, because they didn't think it'd be a good idea for me to go back to my mom's because my mom's codependent, and switching up locations is a good thing, you know what I mean? Because there's
You get away from your old friends, all the triggers, right? Because at this point, you are clean. You are not using.
Mm-mm. And so I go down there, and I notice that it's every day. And I'm still living my life and trying not to pay attention. I'm working there. Somehow I end up I don't know if it was how I got fired from there, or if I got fired, or if I quit. I don't know. I ended up losing that job, and I go and get another job doing something else, and it just. And then I also think the strangeness that's happening in the house in front of me, that I'm not like really. I don't know what to do with that, right? Because this isn't for a role. This is like every day I'm coming home, and my brother is dressed like a woman, and it becomes it's like it's attention, but it's not attention because I have to live there, right? And so I can't really say what I want to say, or even so I just sort of ignore it, and I start drinking, and then I end up getting a car. I screw up again. So, anyways, then then I say what I want to say in an argument, and I told my now sister that I wanted to kill her, and just said a whole bunch of mean ass shit around what she was doing. You know what I mean? And whatever. And so I moved back to my mom's. I'm not doing any drugs yet. I'm drinking here and there a little bit. I hooked back up with the friend that I was doing drugs with in high school when I went away, right? And we decided to, all right, well, we're gonna go. He hasn't been doing anything either. And so I said, hey, let's move to Sacramento. This is around the time when gas was around 99 cents a gallon. I'd say early 90s, maybe. And we just wanted to get away, right? We just want to get out of the area. I'd been seeing this one girl, and so we're kind of cool. I have a girlfriend, and we go and we look, and we decide to move up there. We get an apartment, and the neighbor downstairs does meth, does crank, and so bam, it's right there. And so, I mean, at some point when when you're not on a steady foundation, right? Everything that they say in the programs, I mean, that's real. Even if you're not working a program, even if you're not in AA or NA, it's a house. If your house isn't on a solid foundation, anything that shakes it's going to crumble it. And so that's exactly what happened. I'd never done any work on myself. I did the bare minimum to get out of the situation that I was in. I continued. You just fall right back into the negative behavior, because that's your auto response. You know what I mean? But our system, our operating system, which is our subconscious, is the operating system. The shit up here, no, that's just your intake of information. But your auto responses, which are your subconscious, are the ones that are taking that information and putting it where it needs to go based on the past experiences, blah,
Of
blah,
course.
blah.
And there's nothing to take its place, right?
Yeah.
An analogy I love to use is that if you clean your living room out because you're sick of all the furniture and you put it into an attic and you don't replace it with different furniture, there's going to come a day where you're going to need a chair. So you pull the chair out from the attic, and eventually you've got your living room is full of all of the old furniture. It's the same way if we're trying to change our behavior and we're not replacing it with anything, we are going to default to what we know. And with addiction, it's even more powerful because what you're trying to change is, you're running from or numbing painful emotion. And if you're not giving any tools to deal with those things, then you are going to default to something that is going to make them feel better, which is, for you in your case, it's drugs.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that for our listeners, just to sort of.
Yeah. I know what you're doing. I was just listening. So yeah, I mean, so I moved up there, right?
You start getting back into drugs. So now they're doing drugs. It's there for you. You hadn't done any self-work. You had no resource to deal with this pain that is still very much alive in your body and in your mind. And now you're going to step back into using.
And so the girlfriend that I met, so she comes up there, or that I had, she comes up there, she wants to get a car, right? And so she has some money, and I go and I sign for the car, right? Because I'm as a co-signer for her so she can get it. She put some money down. And so, you know how they do. They'll tell you that it's your car. And if they can't get you financed, they'll ask you to bring it back. And so that happened. And since it was in my name, the whole 3,000, 3,500, whatever came to me, and I blew it. I went and spent the shit. And now she was going to, because that was all her money. And so now she has to come up here and live with me. Now that wasn't the plan. I wasn't trying to do that. I just didn't give a shit. Right. My needs trumped anything over everybody else.
Your addiction, you mean, right?
Well, whatever. Yeah. The addiction, whatever, my survival.
Right.
I'm just going to put it there. My survival,
Yep.
Whether it's getting drugs, whether it's getting food, sex, whatever it is that I need to survive and keep my shit going, however it is, it comes first, no matter what. And that's exactly what she was. She was just a pawn in my own game of survival. And so I took her money with no thought, no of consequence or anything. And so she ended up having to come move in with me. We get together. I'm still doing drugs. I start selling drugs now. We move into some other place. A whole bunch of shit ends up happening around this. But the gist of it is that I was an unfaithful person. I'm using drugs. I'm using women still. I get introduced to strip clubs and start dabbling and going there. And so I would see these women on stage, and for somebody, they seem untouchable to most men, right? You would go to a strip club and you think that they're like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. And you'll never touch that, right? You'll never get to experience that. And so the first time that I was able to take one home, or not home, but cross that barrier, that was like that was igniting a fire that should never have ever been ignited, because it gave me a sense of confidence that I already had, but it was a false sense, right? Because this house keeps getting built up on a faulty foundation.
Popsicle sticks, I like to call it,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I'm using all of these things, these exterior things, to feed this ego monster addiction,
the insatiable demon, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And within that, I'm learning. I've been learning how to manipulate people and do all of these things. And the more that I keep doing it, and the more I get caught, the next relationship, right? Because I'm blowing through them. All right, so I just discarded that one. And that one was because it was really the first time that I actually sort of loved something. You know what I mean? As much as I could love, and I don't even know if it was really love or if it was more a lustish, more of a safety thing. You know what I mean? Like a fallback. Like, I don't need you, but I need what you can provide.
Yeah.
All right. And whatever that is, because it always changed. So I literally had to mourn that. And I went and stayed with a friend, because so here's the thing. I was doing all this fucked up stuff, and I was sleeping with all kinds of different people, and I got her to become a stripper. And so I thought it was a great idea. And here's my manipulative thing, right? Oh, I see how much money they can make. I just had been screwing a stripper and figured out the game, right? And now I'm going to try and make you do it, because if I can get you to do that, then I won't have to work hardly at all.
Right.
Right. So self-preservation, you see the pattern?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but she turned it around on me. She ended up hooking up with a bouncer there, and then cheating on me. And I found that out because I knew something was going on. And I didn't get violent about it. It was almost like a relief in a way, because it's like, I'd rather just know than to not know. I'm not going to go and fight this person. You know what I mean? That didn't really come to mind, but I knew that this was going to be over now. Right. So now I know we're both doing it. There's nothing there. And I'm really young too, by the way. I just turned like maybe 21. Right.
I listened to your journey, and it's like you've lived 1,000 lifetimes by the time you're 21. I mean, it's so hard to fathom all that you have been through in 21 years on the planet. Most, do you know? I'm like,
No, I
I,
know. So at this time, like I do have jobs, right? Even though I'm selling drugs and whatnot, I think it got to the point where I knew that I was going to have to get a job, right? And so I started, like, I could always pick myself up. That's the crazy thing, man, is that no matter how bad it got, I've never been homeless, right? I've never been down and out. I've never hit Skid Row. I've always managed to like skate through. Now, either hustling or using my looks, something, you know what I mean? And so I went and I got a job as a server at like a Marie Collander's. And I was like, all right, so I know I'm going to have to make my way off of this. And I think I'd gotten a job too at El Torito during like a lunch shift. And so I'd made some friends there. And so when this happened, I'd come home and the locks were changed and I couldn't get in. And so I went and I scaled the thing and I ripped the door off, the sliding glass door off the hinges, and got in, and my dog was gone, and it was my dog. My dog was gone, all my stuff was gone, and I'd had a grow room that I'd set up, right, for marijuana way back in the day before anybody was doing it. And so I had all the equipment, all the plants were all gone. And the only thing that was left there was the fish tank, one of my chairs, my clothes, and then she had a bunch of clothes that she had left that she couldn't get in that trip because she wasn't expecting me to show up there
so
and be able to
she
get
came
in.
in and stole everything in your dog.
Yeah, with the bouncer.
Wow.
And so when I left, I grabbed what I could, and it wasn't in my name, right? The apartment, it was in her name. And so I went and I got a couple of gallons of bleach, and I put all of her clothes in the middle of the floor, bleached them all, bleached all the carpets, and then I kicked the fish tank. It was a 55-gallon fish tank on a second floor, and it flooded out the whole place. So, and then that, I mean, that's the kind of awesome guy I was. And so
What I think about is the guy that's doing this. I just think the depth of pain that you're in.
maybe, but
You-
I mean, you know, it, so I have a wonderful pattern of 5 years. All right. Either can't stand them past 5 years, or I've fucked it up to the point where they can't stand me after 5 years. And so that was the first one. I go through that, and I'm single, and so I'm friends before I did all that to the apartment complex. I was friends with the manager, and the manager's a woman, an attractive woman, and so is the sales lady. It's a sales girl who I ended up hooking up with at one point too. So the manager knew what I did, and she rented me another one anyways. And so I get into another apartment. It's a 2-bedroom. My mom co-signs for it to get in there. I have a job. I'm working at these two places, right? And then I get a third job. So picture this. I have this set up for myself. I'm working the lunch shift, so takes care of my food. I'm working at the gym in the morning. I get a job as a personal trainer at 24-hour fitness, which you don't have to have a lot. You just have to go through their stuff. And so that's in the morning. So I got my workouts on, right? I'm exercising, I'm eating lunch, I'm making some money there. At nighttime, I'm working as a bouncer at a nightclub. So I have my alcohol and I have my women, my choose of women, right? Because they always like the bouncer. This lasts for about 3 months until I burn out and can't sustain it because I'm bringing home too many people and partying too much and can't balance it, right? Burning the candle at both ends, and something's got to give. I bring in this roommate, and I have a friend that I'm hanging out with too. So I'm not with any women, right? There's no relationships. My relationships now are with dudes, which is like that's different for me, right? And it's not like sexual relationships, like buddies, you know what I mean? Like bromances. And so we're hanging out, we're palling around, doing all these things, and we have this great idea. And I can't say a whole lot about this because I never got in trouble for it. But there was somebody that somebody knew that was a dancer that had a lot of money stashed away. They knew where they had it. I paid for the lockpick set. We sent our other guy to go and do it. comes back with like, fuck, I mean, like 25 grand in cash. And I'm like 22, maybe 21, 22. I'm working. And so when you're young and you have never had that kind of cash in your hand before, and it's a lot of dough, split that three ways,
That's a
25.
ton of money, especially then. And you're a kid to boot. I mean, you're a young adult.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the job went up, the job's gone. They're all gone. I'm, paying with the cash that I'm making. I'm starting to sell drugs now. So in this whole thing, right, we are all living as if we are rich and on the high hog, going to clubs, doing like we have an entourage with us, literally, there's a whole bunch of people in our group, we're paying for drinks, we're doing all this stuff, an illusion is really what it is. It's an illusion that we've created. And so within that, we end up at these clubs with other folks, and I end up in another bromance with this other dude who I ended up saving and backing in a fight that could have happened with a rival, whatever. But I had my group with me, and we backed this person, and so that sparked another relationship with this guy, and this guy's a coke dealer, and so it's like I keep meeting. You see what I'm saying? It's like I'm climbing up and higher and higher and higher into this thing. And I'm still an addict, right? I don't think that I'm using crank at this point. I'm not into speed anymore. Right. Somehow I managed to do away with that, because I think the people that I was hanging out at the time wasn't a thing with them, right? And so I could always switch things. You know what I mean? It's so like when I was selling coke, I'm a coke addict. When I'm selling ecstasy, I'm an ecstasy addict. It's like, when somebody say, do you got a problem with that? No, I just switch. No, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with this. And it was just always available. And so I learned how to sell drugs, and how to do even more things and get more involved in the criminal world and the criminality of stuff, right? And how this worked and how that worked, and more involved
Well,
in the
and you
stripper.
get to know the system, and and so you become an expert at manipulating, right?
Yep.
Because you manipulate to get what you need to survive. I mean, that at the end of the day, all of the things that you're doing, bringing this full circle, is for you to survive in the only ways you know how.
Yep. And so this just continues. It continues and continues. I ended up hooking up with my first daughter's mom, and we're in the late 90s now. And so I'm going to raves, selling ecstasy. I'm like deep in this world, right? And all my day revolves. I don't work. My days revolve around Mondays were the only day that I wasn't at a club. But from Tuesday through Sunday, it was nightclubs and strip clubs. I go to the nightclub, it closed down. We go to the strip club afterwards and try to make some more money. Or one of my favorite tricks is get the girls high around closing time, or like an hour before, where it's just kicking in and they won't want to go home. And so they'll need somewhere to come party. And well, so is the name born for me was called Mr. After Hours. That's what everybody called me, because I would always have people coming over after the clubs, and we'd do drugs. I had DJs that were friends. They would come and turn table and all, you know what I mean? So it was literally, I created this environment around me to feed my ego, feed my addiction, feed everything. Right. So that went on for a little while until I ruined that. I ended up with another stripper, knocking her up. And then I got into it with somebody else who was a lot like, so I'm a big dude, right? But up to this point, I never really get challenged, right? I'm just a big guy that no one wants to fuck with. And so I've never earned that, right? Like,
You were just born into a big body.
right? Yeah, I've never earned like I can fight. I've never earned like, I'm a badass or anything. Just people never challenged me, and I never, had to
Deal
step
with
up
it.
to the plate.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this guy who I know for sure probably would have kicked my ass. And so we had got into it, and we started to have a fight, and he didn't have the upper hand, so he bolted, right? And so he comes back after that, with a gun and some other stuff, and like I wouldn't let him in the house, and it just turned into this thing. And I'm like, you know what, man, we need to get out of here. Like, I need to run. I need to run somewhere where, I can feel safe and I don't have these problems. And since you're a stripper, the perfect place for us to go is Vegas, because there's no lack of strip clubs there. And I can do whatever I want to do until I figure out, or you can take care of me until I figure out what I'm going to do. But she was pregnant too. So she wasn't showing, and she went all the way up till she was like 7 months and started showing, and then went back like 2 weeks after she gave birth. And that's a whole nother thing.
Thanks everyone for taking the time to listen to Sean's 3-part story. Again, just a reminder, this is running 3 consecutive weeks. Thank you, and see you all next week.